Tonight, the bully blinks. Rachel Notley backs down from her blacklist of the rebel. But for how long? It's February 17th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
A partial victory today, but a victory nonetheless. The bully who was the NDP Premier of Alberta, Rachel Notley, has backed down from her illegal blacklist of journalists. That blacklist had a single name on it, the Rebel.media, and anyone even connected to us. The only problem is blacklists like that are illegal. Governments in Canada cannot regulate journalists or restrict which journalists are allowed to enter public buildings like the legislature based on political vendettas. Notley's blacklist wasn't a casual or thoughtless decision. It was carefully considered, lawyered, and surely approved by the Premier herself. She even had the temerity to order a Department of Justice lawyer to send the blacklist to us in a letter, saying the rebel, and even anyone connected with us, is just banned. Well, that's un-Canadian. And Canadians overwhelmingly told her so. Notley's shocking attempt to ban journalists that she doesn't like dominated national news. It trended on Twitter and on Facebook, and even made international headlines. It was front page of the National Post. There was an editorial in the Globe and Mail. Huge coverage in Alberta, of course, even coverage in Quebec. So today, Notley's spin doctor sent out this email, quote, "We've heard a lot of feedback from Albertans and media over the course of the last 2 days, and it's clear we made a mistake. The government has appointed former Western Canadian Bureau Chief for Canadian Press, Heather Boyd, to consult and give us recommendations on what the government's media policy should be. In the meantime, no one will be excluded from government media events," unquote. Translation, Notley was fine with being a bully when she thought she could roll right over us, like she's rolled over Alberta farmers and Alberta oilmen. They thought they could bulldoze us too, but they wound up making national fools of themselves. So it's a partial victory, but pay attention to that last line in the spin doctor's note. Notley has hired a consultant to advise her on how to handle troublesome journalists. The lifting of the blacklist is only, quote, "in the meantime." Notley may well revert to a policy of government-related journalism if her hand-picked consultant can find a way to spin it. But look, the law is clear. We have freedom of the press in Canada. No matter what Notley or her hand-picked friends say, governments do not have the power to regulate journalists, and any blacklist barring journalists from public events based on political vendettas is obviously illegal. So it's a partial win, a win for freedom, and for Albertans and Canadians who want independent journalism. But there's a massive loophole built right into it for Notley to come back to regulate us later. Rachel Notley's a bully. She just couldn't get away with it this time. But she's not done trying. And she's taken no personal responsibility for her illegal blacklist. The passive tone of today's unsigned statement, mistakes were made, and the fact that it was issued by a staff member, not Notley herself, shows Notley is genetically incapable of saying sorry. Not to our reporters, Sheila Gunn-Reid and Holly Nicholas, certainly not to me. Notley would never apologize to us, and her apology is meaningless to us. I'm saying sorry to Albertans for sacrificing Alberta's culture of freedom to get even with her critics. As to the rebel, well, we're going to keep doing our unique brand of journalism, news, opinion, and activism. We obviously are covering Alberta in a way that no one else is, a way that Albertans love and Rachel Notley hates. That's a pretty good form of media accreditation, don't you think? We're going to keep reporting the truth about Rachel Notley because Albertans love it and Notley hates it. let me tell you one more thing. As you know, we hired top lawyers to deal with this matter professionally, calmly, and to win back our freedoms for us and all Albertans. We started with a letter to the government last week outlining what the government was doing wrong and asking Notley to assure us it wouldn't continue. We gave Notley a week to comply and said if she didn't, we'd sue. Well, Notley has backed down, but like I say, she's threatened to do this again if her hand-picked advisor says so. So our lawyer's work isn't done yet. We will be writing back to that same Department of Justice lawyer to ask him to officially confirm in writing that the illegal blacklist against us is removed and removed permanently. The Department of Justice thought it was their place to officially announce the blacklist on stationery. So let it be their place to officially renounce the blacklist on their letterhead too. I think those lawyers are actually sick of being dragged into Notley's personal vendettas. They have real jobs to do as opposed to harassing journalists. You know, so many members of the public telephoned that Justice Department lawyer, he literally had to change his voicemail message. Here, listen.
Hi, if this is respect to Rebel Media, you can phone the media line at 780-422-4905. Otherwise, I'm away from my desk, and you can leave a message, and I'll respond as soon as I can. Thanks.
He's not answering his phone. I don't blame him. He didn't sign up for this baloney. Same thing for the sheriff who kicked Sheila out of the legislature. I thought it was inappropriate for him to do so. He should have told Notley that he was there for her personal security, not her political security. And if Notley wanted someone to throw out journalists, well, she'd have to find someone else to do her dirty work. Now, I understand an officer's duty is to comply with civilian political oversight, but that's different than letting Notley and her staff literally instruct a sheriff to clear political enemies out. But look, the blame is not on the Justice Department lawyer or the sheriff. The blame is on Notley, the bully who is turning all these government levers into tools for the NDP to get even. This has been one of the greatest embarrassments of Notley's appalling term as premier. Do you really think she's contrite? Or do you think she's actually angrier than ever, that rage? Do you really think that Notley's going to let us do our jobs without harassing us in other ways? So if Notley tries to weasel her way back to another blacklist, or to find some other improper way to attack us, or other journalists, or other critics, look, we're just going to have to do this all over again until Rachel Notley accepts freedom of the press on her own, or until a judge orders her to. So we're not done. We're demanding acknowledgement from the Department of Justice that the vendetta is over, or we're going to sue. It's a partial victory, but a victory for sure. For us at the Rebel, for Sheila and Holly Nicholas, our great team of Alberta moms fighting every day to bring you great news and opinion. But it's also a win for Alberta and all of Canada and our values of freedom of the press against an angry bully premier who thought she could push us around like she pushes everyone else around. Stay with us for more after these words.
I love Alberta. I've lived here my whole life and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of our free market, pro-business, low-tax, do-it-yourself attitude. And now, I'm watching my province get destroyed. We've all had hints of the NDP's radical views in the past, but no one actually thought they'd ever run this province. Not even them. And now they are. And the worst is yet to come. I give my sad forecast for Alberta in my new ebook, The Destroyers, Rachel Notley and the NDP's War on Alberta.
Welcome back. Well, as I mentioned, Premier Notley has blinked. Her press secretary, Cheryl Oates, put out an email today saying that as of immediately, the rebel is no longer on a blacklist. We will be able to attend events, and indeed today, Sheila Gunn-Reid and Holly Nicholas have attended an event. They backed down in the face of a massive storm of protest. But I should note that this lifting of the illegal blacklist is only in the meantime, because Rachel Notley has hired an external advisor to come up with policies that may in the future limit journalists like us again. Well, a lot has happened in the last few days. Joining us all now to figure it all out is our friend Duane Bratt. He's a political science professor at Mount Royal University in Calgary, and he joins us now via Skype. Duane, great to see you again. Thanks for taking time to come on the show.
No problem, Ezra.
Well, it has been such a whirlwind out here, and I'm here in exile in Toronto, but for our reporters in Alberta, Sheila Gunn-Reid and Holly Nicholas, they've lived in the center of this whirlwind. They've faced armed sheriffs saying, get out of the legislature. They've had lawyers' letters from the Department of Justice saying, stay out. And it's all happened in the last few days. What's your perspective? I mean, you have a little bit of distance. We're right in the middle of it. What does the whole thing look like to you at a little bit of distance?
The Notley government has really stepped in it here by going so far as banning rebel media. And the story isn't over yet, because they're going to continue the investigation. They brought in Heather Boyd, the former Canadian press correspondent, to look at it. But there's a larger issue about what constitutes media in 2016 and going further. You've got citizen journalists, you've got online journalists. It's a much tougher situation than what I think most governments in the past have been used to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by now, I think a lot of people who are news hounds, and I would put you in that category, and me, and probably most of our viewers, people who love news, they're familiar with Huffington Post. Maybe they go to Vice.com, which has news reporters. So these are all internet news sources, and they have a political opinion for sure, and occasionally they have quality issues. But I don't think there's anyone in the world who would say the Huffington Post is not a news organization, or Vice.com. This whole fight for the last few days has felt really fake, that they were trying to come up with some reason to kick us out that wasn't the obvious reason. They just hate our guts. It's okay to hate my guts. Get in line. But they were trying to say, well, you're just online, or you're just an opinion journalist. And well, you kick out opinion journalists, that's half the people in the Bureau also, in the legislature press gallery also. I mean,
You're absolutely right. You were not banned because they didn't see you as a media outlet. They banned you because they don't like what the rebel has to say. And I mean, on some branches, you do fit the profile of a media outlet. You cover stories, you have an online presence. In other cases, you don't really fit that model. The petitions and the mugs. But at the same time, this wasn't about being a media. This was about the NDP government in Alberta not liking you. Yep. So they came up with this excuse, and they used some testimony that you gave saying you're not a reporter. Well, being a columnist is not a reporter. And as I mentioned, would Don Bratt have been banned? Would Graham Thompson have been banned? Would Rex Murphy have been banned? I don't think so. But once they started saying that, they have to continue the process. But there's a challenge. If you say that everybody who calls themselves a journalist is now invited to a press conference or a lockup, does simply holding a piece of paper and saying, this is Duane's press and I'm now a journalist, you could be inundated. At the same time, where do you draw the line? It's a problem that didn't exist 2 weeks ago, but it's a problem that exists for the government right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I am open to people saying, well, there's only a certain number of seats, there's only so much room. Real technical objections, but obviously we've all seen the video now of Sheila going to the door of the legislature. I think we've got that film right here for those who haven't seen it. Let me play it just for a second. This is Sheila standing at the door of the legislature where Justin Trudeau and Rachel Notley were about to speak. Clearly, there was no shortage of room. She just was on what they called a no-go list. Here, take a quick look at this.
Interpretation for today's event?
We already spoke to Darcy Henton. He said there should be no problem to come in. What? Sorry, why is that? Sorry, why?
You know, I look at that now, Duane, and I'm sort of mad. I'm not that mad at the sheriff himself because he was following orders. Although I think a self-respecting sheriff should have said to the Premier's office, I'm not here to do your political errands. I'm here to protect you from bad guys. But I put myself in Sheila Gunn Reid's position. I mean, she's a slight figure, you know, she's littler than me, and a big guy with a gun says, get out of here. That would be intimidating. And that's the thing. This was not because there was a lack of room or, God forbid, that Sheila was misbehaved. This was a political enemies list. And I gotta say, I think this has changed some people's opinion about Rachel Notley as a person. I think she was elected in part because she was smiling and seemed nice and genuine and legit. But I think this shows a darker side of Rachel Notley. We call her a bully. I think we have a little bit of evidence that she is, and you don't have to be a right-winger to think that. A lot of left-wingers and liberals thought she was acting like a bully. Last word to you, Duane. Do you think she's hurt herself here in a larger political way? Do you think she's damaged her reputation?
You know, I've wondered who made this call. Was it Premier Notley or was it somebody on her staff? But if you look at that communications office that she's assembled, almost all of them are former journalists. Yeah. So you would think that they would have a higher sensitivity to an issue around freedom of the press than what has obviously transpired over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I think that this was a very thoughtful decision on her part. I mean, remember, we were blackballed a couple of times. And so we sent in a Top Gun lawyer, Fred Kozak, to say, what's going on here? Are you doing this on purpose? Please write back to us. And they had the Department of Justice reply. And let's take a quick look at that Department of Justice letter. It's really a one-sentence letter. Our client's position remains that the rebel and those who identify as being connected to the rebel are not journalists and not entitled to access media lockups or other such events. So my point is, this wasn't a casual move. This letter wasn't drafted by a former journalist, Duane. This letter was drafted by a Department of Justice lawyer. I think they wanted to steamroll us. It was only when the national media freaked out on them that they backed down. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And it came right across the board. I heard Sheila on CBC this morning. There was an editorial in the Globe and Mail. You know, Lauren Gunter probably got the ball rolling with the Edmonton Sun. So it was really when that emerged. And unfortunately, there is a bad precedent, a bad history in this province, going back to the days of Eberhardt, around press censorship that people should be more aware of and more cautious about. And here's another point that I will bring up. With the consolidation and the of media organs, you're talking with every major paper now being owned by the same company. We need additional voices, whether that is rabble or whether that is rebel, being at these events.
That's a very good point. I mean, if there's only a half a dozen journalists and you've got 50 spin doctors, they're sort of outgunned. And we need more voices. Well,
the communications office is now much larger than the press gallery, which is actually quite troubling.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, Duane, Bratt, I very much appreciate your thoughtful comments. Thanks for giving me your perspective. For folks who want to see all the documents that we've shown you and who want to chip into our legal defense fund, by the way, we're not calling off the lawyer because, as you know, today's statement from the Premier's office just says, in the meantime, the blacklist is gone. It's not gone forever, so we're keeping our lawyer on standby. If you want to get all the documents and see more, go to Rachel Notley is a bully. Actually, Notley is a bully.ca for all the rest of it. We've been talking with Duane Bratt. Thanks so much for joining us, Duane. Stay with us for more right after these messages.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to therebel.media/store to find out more.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back to the show. Something I never thought I would hear. Saudi jets will be based at a NATO airfield in Turkey to attack targets in Syria. At the same time, Russia and Iran are fighting with the Syrians against, well, the Islamic State and other rebels too. And then the United States and Canada have soldiers in the middle of things. How will this end? Not well, I think. But joining us now via Skype from New York City is our friend David Goldman, who's the columnist with Asia Times, and he joins us now via Skype. David, great to see you again. We love talking with you about these gigantic civilizational clashes and, empires receding and acceding. What is going on with Saudi Arabia and Turkey teaming up in a NATO military base to attack Syria? Is that really going to happen?
Well, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey are all declining states and declining at a galloping pace. They're all fighting from a sense of weakness and a sense of impending doom. In the case of Saudi Arabia, at $30 a barrel for oil, they run out of money in 5 years and the monarchy will collapse. It's the International Monetary Fund's estimate that they're out of money in 5 years, and without the welfare state, the Saud family has no business owning a country. They'll be replaced by something like a military government, the Muslim Brotherhood, or whatever replaces them. Iran is facing a demographic disaster. The question with Iran is whether they run out of money or out of people or out of water first. But 10 to 15 years from now, Iran will be in catastrophic decline, and they're trying to use everything they have now to establish their little Shiite empire before that sets in. And in the case of Turkey, the Kurds are going to be a majority of Turkey's young people in 20 years, which means Turkey will cease to exist in its present form. Erdogan, the Saudi monarchy, and the Iranian mullahs are all fighting desperately against an impending decline. And as long as that fight remains contained to the Middle Eastern theater, it's a dance of the doomed, which doesn't really affect the rest of us. The real danger is that the conflict spreads outside the Middle East and affects us or other countries. In that case, it gets very dangerous.
Well, I mean, let's talk about that. It was only a few months ago that a Russian fighter jet that briefly crossed over Turkish territory was shot down by two Turkish jets, F-16s, American-made planes, if I'm not mistaken, flying from a NATO base. And the NATO alliance said, oh, we got your back, Turkey. So, yeah, if this was just Iran and Saudi Arabia and Turkey bashing each other's brains out in Syria, I think the world would look at it as we looked at the Iran-Iraq war of decades ago is, can we root against both sides? But when you've got Russia in the midst of it, when you're flying out of a NATO base in Turkey, and when you've got Americans and Canadians and other allies on the ground, I just feel like we're looking for a fuse to be lit here. I mean, I don't know my World War I history as well as I should, but it feels like everyone on this poker table is upping the ante, and there's more and more chips. Everyone's moving more and more military assets, more and more prestige into it. How can this end any way other than badly, David?
Well, Turkey would like nothing more than to make this a NATO issue, because matched against Russia and Russia's very effective S-400 anti-air system, Turkey would lose in a confrontation. So they don't want to fight Russia by itself. They can't. So they want to drag NATO in. NATO does not want to fight for Turkey because they know exactly what Turkey's game is. NATO doesn't want to fight with Russia. So Turkey is doing everything it can to try to raise dust and create a problem that would become a NATO problem, and NATO is basically saying, well, we've got your back, but not really, not if you, for example, step across the Syrian border and send soldiers in. So I don't think that's going to do anything, and I don't think Saudi Arabia will send soldiers in simply because they don't have any soldiers willing to die for the Saud family. Why should they? If you're a young Saudi, it's fine to get a military salary and shoot domestic opponents if you're asked to, but to fight real soldiers, why would you do that? So Saudi Arabia is bluffing. No one is going to fly NATO planes or Saudi planes into Syria and test Russian air defenses because we don't want to find out how good the S-400 system is. What happens if Russia destroys a bunch of Turkish or Saudi F-16s? It makes the United States look like idiots. We don't want to get the answer to that question, so I don't believe that's going to happen. That's not what worries me. The big worry is how this might spill over, and that's Iran's missile development. The United States has given Iran no penalties for developing long-range missiles which can carry weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, biological weapons. The Iranians are testing and bragging about intercontinental ballistic missiles, and that's an enormous risk. The main thing to do is to make clear to the Iranians by bombing them, by sabotaging them, by hurting them in some way that gets the message across that they're not allowed to have the capability to take the fight outside the region. I really don't care if Iranian regulars get chopped up by Syrian Sunni rebels inside Syria.
Well, look, you talk about three doomed cultures, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, but add to that $100 billion or so of American money that goes to Iran, the lifting of sanctions on Iran because of Barack Obama's non-treaty deal with the Ayatollahs. And all of a sudden, even if Iran is doomed demographically, that's a 10, 20-year proposition. In the meantime, they've got a lot of money that they can make a lot of ruckus with. Every country in Europe, even Bombardier jets, I'm sure in Canada, are looking to sell. I'm sure every country in the world is looking to sell both civilian and military equipment to Iran. They may go out in a blaze of glory, but that blaze may be so hot, it may singe the world. Isn't it possible that you have a situation where a jet is down, like Turkey did to Russia already? That a fuse would emerge from there, that Vladimir Putin would feel compelled to prove his masculinity and strike back at Turkey, maybe even in Turkish territory. I don't know.
Let's take two things. One is Iran's finances. Iran makes, by my calculation, less than $30 billion a year on oil and gas at current oil and gas prices. Their annual budget is $88 billion a year. They have a $58 billion shortfall. They're not going to make that up by selling pistachios and Persian carpets. So the $100 billion they can take down from this idiotic and counterproductive nuclear deal, which, as you know, I'm dead set against, that tides them over for a couple of years. The Iranians do not have the money to buy lots of planes or capital equipment or whatever else the West wants to sell them. That's a fool's errand. As for Putin, Turkey shot down the Su-24, the Russian ground attack aircraft, based on a 30 or 40-second violation of Turkish airspace. Do you know how many times Turkish airplanes, military aircraft, have violated Greek airspace in the last year? 1,400. This kind of thing happens all the time. Erdogan did that to try to draw Putin into a fight so that NATO would feel compelled to back him up. Putin was not as stupid as to oblige Erdogan and give him the grounds to draw NATO in. That's the last thing Putin wants. What does Putin want? His objectives are very clear. He is a rational player. He's not, Yosemite Sam waiting to shoot his pistols off. Putin, number one, wants to destroy the Sunni jihadists in Syria because Russia is terrified that the 15,000 Russian citizens now fighting with ISIS or other jihad organizations will go back and promote terrorism in Russia. Russia has a population which is 1/7 Muslim, many of whom are radicalized. That's an existential threat. On top of that, they want their port on the Mediterranean, which the Assad government has given them. They want presence in Syria. They want the prestige. They want to demonstrate the power of their arms. But those are Russia's objectives. They don't want to fight with NATO. The problem is not Russia, but Iran as a potentially irrational actor, maybe Saudi Arabia. It's very hard to know how that monarchy thinks because it's opaque to the rest of us. There are two ways in which the conflict can be exported out of the region. One is jihadists leave the region and commit acts of terrorism elsewhere, which we've already had, including San Bernardino, Paris, and so forth. The second is that somebody will fire long-range missiles out of the region. And the single biggest destabilizing issue is not what goes on the ground in Syria. That's disgusting, but not dangerous. The danger is that the Iranians will have the ability to fire a missile at Israel, at Saudi Arabia, at whomever. At that point, we have a world war. So the Obama administration's failure to penalize the Iranians for developing ICBMs is the single gravest strategic error in this whole mess. And the second gravest is trying to find moderate Islamists to oppose to radical Islamists. The moderates tend to get co-opted by the radicals, as we've seen in Syria.
David, I have to tell you, I am depressed, and there's not a single ray of sunshine in anything you've just said, but that's the world we live in.
No, there is a ray of sunshine, Ezra. It's very easy to fix. All you have to do is whack the Iranians, and they can't have ICBMs and they can't have nuclear weapons. As Ehud Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, said, that's one evening's bombing by the United States.
I think
very easy to fix.
Well, as long as Barack Obama is president, I think you'll have Americans defending Iran. In fact, that is one of the protocols. If you take it figuratively, the Americans must assure the quality of the Iranian program. They must protect it. David, we're out of time. I've enjoyed this conversation as an intellectual engagement, but I found it terrifying and depressing, and I have no doubt that more jets will be shot down and there will be more risk to the world, and the world will continue to burn. David, I hope you'll join us again when that happens, and we will...
Ezra, cheer up. It's hopeless but not serious.
Thanks, my friend. That's David Goldman with the Asia Times.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to therebel.media/themegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out.
Welcome back. Viewer feedback. Let's just talk one more time about this great battle for freedom of the press that we've been in these past few days. Thank you for your support. I know it was only the public outrage that made the bully blink. 250 Saber writes and says, great report, Ezra. Look forward to all the stories, and I'm in Sheila's corner. You will win in court. Well, the amazing news, as you've heard, is that the bully blinked. It's incredible. Rachel Notley has bullied everyone in her path so far, big oil, farmers, taxpayers, the official opposition. The only thing that has made her stop and retreat is a mom of three from Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, our hero, Sheila Gunn Reid. She's her Alberta bureau chief, and Holly Nicholas, our Calgary freelancer. Justin Schubert writes, what the F? I voted for NDP. Is this for real? If so, Rachel needs to be run out of town on a rail. This is a democracy, boys and girls, and you do not suppress media. You're no different than the PC hacks that treated us like we don't matter. All sides need to be represented. You know, When leftists say they admire Hugo Chavez and Che Guevara, and you think they just mean it figuratively, you never think they actually want to bring in restrictions on the media, Hugo Chavez style, until they start to do it. Here's 3 tweets in a row from Susan Delacourt. She's formerly with the Toronto Star. 3 tweets in a row. She says, I don't believe in using access to power to bully free expression. And I'm sure in retrospect, Rebel Media doesn't either. What does that mean? And then she said, I defend the rights he didn't defend for anyone critical of Harper in the past decade. Principle, it works that way. And then finally, I will look forward to Ezra's spirited defense of all of us with benefit of hindsight, but a principle is a principle. Now, I gotta say, at first, I had no idea what Susan Delacourt was talking about. Now, that's not new for me, of course. I have never understood her, but someone explained it to me. See, Susan Delacourt is equating how Stephen Harper treated journalists with how Notley does. As in, sometimes Stephen Harper couldn't stand journalists, and he didn't take questions from certain reporters, or he only took 3 questions, or he only talked to reporters once in a while. Now, that may be unwise. Harper certainly got a lot of media criticism for it, but how is hating journalists remotely comparable with ordering armed sheriffs to kick journalists out of the legislature and having the Department of Justice write a letter to our company confirming a blacklist to anyone in our company and anyone even, quote, connected to our company? There is no comparison except in Susan Delacourt's mind. See, she has actually never lifted a finger for freedom of speech that I've ever seen, but she loves to nurse her fantasy grievance that Stephen Harper was a tyrannical bully and Rachel Notley is a progressive princess. I'm pleased to say Delacourt's bizarre comments today are a rarity. 95% of the working media that I've seen agrees Notley is wrong, and what she tried to do was unprecedented in the modern age in Canada. Well, that's our show for today. I want to tell you, we're going to celebrate a little bit this victory, but we're not out of the woods yet. You really think Rachel Notley is contrite? You really think she's reformed? Do you really think she respects freedom of any sort, let alone freedom to criticize Her Highness? I don't. She doesn't even have the conscience to come forward and personally admit that this was all a disastrous mistake. She's laid it on a lowly spokeswoman, Cheryl Oates, who had to send out that bizarre email about, well, in the meantime, we'll back down. It wasn't Cheryl Oates who made that decision. It was Rachel Notley. You don't instruct a Department of Justice lawyer to send a blacklist like that without being approved at the highest levels. Rachel Notley is actually a coward. Once in a while, Ralph Klein would come out and say, screwed up, folks, I'm sorry, forgive me. And every Albertan did. Rachel Notley does not have that character. Rachel Notley, in her blood, has an authoritarian streak. We've seen it against oil and gas jobs. We've seen it against farmers. And now we see it against the rebel.media. Do you really think she's changed? I don't. Hey, thanks for tuning in. We've got more news every day this week. Great shows elsewhere on the Rebel.media website. Hey, did you notice that our website's freshened up a bit? That was in honor of our 1-year anniversary. Well, that's it for me today. And until tomorrow, keep fighting for freedom. Good night.